My wife has taken up writing icons. You don't paint icons. We were Protestants. These things sound awfully Catholic. We went on a tour of an Eastern Orthodox church. They have all these icons, of course, in the Eastern churches. They're really beautiful. And one of the things we asked was, why is it in 2 dimensions? Well, you're the third dimension. You bring the third dimension. That's God reaching out to you. I was raised in Louisiana. My parents were, I was raised a Methodist. My mother was a musician. My father was a small businessman. When I was in elementary school, we had some things happened that Louisiana started busing. And so I started going to a Catholic school. And my mother had worked for the Catholic Church for many years at that time. She was a musician. She was a music director. That was really my first intersection with Catholicism. We went to Mass every week when I was at school. I always found that very, very interesting. And when I was in 7th grade, Sister Virginia Lee came in. I remember she walked really fast. She really kind of walked. And she walked into the room and she said, I need 2 altar servers. Oh, there was altar boys at that time. And she said, I need 2 altar boys. And so one boy raised his hand and said, I'll do it. And she said, I got a funeral and we need 2 servers. And so one boy said, and so nobody else answered. And so I said, well, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll do it. And she thought about it. And I remember there was a very pregnant pause at that time. And now, on this side of being a Catholic, I know that she was doing the numbers in her head. I need an altar server. His mother's the music director here, but he's not Catholic. And so it was and she's like, do whatever he tells you to do. So I went off and I became an altar server for that. And I was a Protestant altar server. And I've told people this story today, and they're like, that's just not possible. How's that happen? But so I don't know how it happened, but I loved it. We went to liturgy training, and I served at school masses. Of course, we were going to my church every Sunday, so I didn't serve on Sunday masses, but I did get to serve at some of the high masses, like confirmation. So I got to see my classmates get confirmed. They got confirmed 8th grade. And I remember there was an interesting experience with the bishop there when he was giving communion to everybody, and I've always just my priests all knew not to, just to kind of move on past me, and I just kind of wait, and he looked at me really funny. So I'm not sure what conversations happened after that, but I'm sure they were interesting conversations. How is this kid an altar server? Went into high school, and that was in 1983. The Pope had declared I think it was a year of Jubilee, and in 1984, we were going to send a delegation to Rome. And so I put my name in the hat thinking that I would never get selected. And lo and behold, I don't know how it happened, my name did get selected. So I went home and told my parents, and I figured they would say, no way, but they said yes. And so I went to Rome, and that was 1984. And it turns out that was, I think the next year was the first World Youth Day, and that was kind of like the precursor to the World Youth Day. But we got to go to Rome. I got to go to Rome with this group of people. We went to St. Peter's. There was a candlelight procession from St. John Lateran to St. Peter's, and we were not even a football field away from the Pope, maybe even 50 yards away from the Pope, Pope John Paul II. And even though I wasn't Catholic, I knew that this was a significant event. And then going into St. Peter's, and parts of St. Peter's were open. The holy doors were open, and we got to see that. And the depths of St. Peter, going down all the way down to the tombs, which are not normally open, got to see that. And seeing all the churches and the beautiful churches, it was just beautiful. And as a 14-year-old, it wasn't lost on me. I just remember being just like, this is places we studied in history, and this is a big deal. And we had an audience with the Pope, a very private audience, with a small room. Normally, the audience room is a huge auditorium, and it was groups of kids going in, and we met with them, and that was I would have gladly become a Catholic then. But when I returned home, of course, that was not meant to be, because we were Methodists, and that was that. But I never forgot that. That stuck with me. I wouldn't say I was really a practicing Catholic, and that was not even a thought for me to be Catholic then. And so eventually, though, I graduated from LSU, and I became a teacher. I moved to Houston, Texas, where I still live. And a couple of years later, I met my wife, the woman who would become my wife through my sister. Her name is Erin. She wasn't Catholic, but I was attending a Methodist church, which was very kind of liturgical at the time, and I really liked that. But while we were dating, we decided we were going to go to her church after we got married, which we did. And we attended that church for 22 years, I believe. And this was a charismatic Pentecostal church. And so we started having our kids and raising them in the church, just as we had been raised. And so my wife, of course, had been Catholic. She was baptized a Catholic. But her family left the church before she was confirmed. But that was just not, literally being a Catholic was never on our radar at that time. 2011, I kind of engaged. I started a spiritual direction class. And that was a 2-year program to learn how to become a spiritual director. Spiritual direction kind of was starting to make a comeback in Protestantism. That's something that had been lost. And so many Protestant churches are starting that practice again. And in the second year of that course, we learned about something called theosis, or deification. And this is not something that I had ever heard about. And, we were leaders in the church. We were small group leaders in the church. It's not like we were kind of passive, just Sunday. We attended church every Sunday, and we were practicing and studying and learning and trying to follow Christ. There was always something kind of missing, though. I've had a kind of a somewhat pernicious fear of death, and I had a lot of questions. There were people would ask questions, and I didn't have an answer, and then they would kind of challenge me, and it didn't make sense. And so when I learned about this thing called theosis, it really, it's being united to Christ and God coming in us and being joined into His life. That really hit me, and it also hit me that I had never heard of this before, as long as I've been in the church. So that started me. I'm a bit of a manic reader, and started me reading about this and learning about it, and that started me reading and learning what the church fathers said. And it can be a pretty dangerous thing for a Protestant to start reading the church fathers. Then I started asking questions about, well, there was a time before the Bible was written, or before the New Testament was written. How did Christians know what to do before the New Testament was written? Those are also dangerous questions to start asking. These things that I'm reading sound awfully Catholic, but that couldn't possibly be. Because the Catholics are wrong. But that started me down this path. And so then around about 2015, I think it was, our church entered some issues. There was an issue in the youth program. And so we volunteered to become the youth pastors. And it was around during that time, I was reading a lot of 1 Corinthians and still reading the church fathers. And we did this thing where we decided we're going to do church like Paul describes it in 1 Corinthians. This is how Christians did it. This is how they did it in the early days. So we started doing that, and the first night we did it, some boys came up and said, we have sung a lot of songs. It would be great if we had like a songbook or something that people could follow all the songs. I was like, it's great. So I typed up a songbook, we say all these common prayers. We should have people should understand these prayers. After about a month of this, we were going home, and I looked at my wife and I said, we just reinvented the Mass, and she kind of laughed. And so there's these, the liturgical elements were being brought into our services. The charismatic church we were in, the Vineyard, prides itself on being very non-liturgical. It's a great service, it's great, but it's just more and more things are kind of coming up in me that I just something's not making sense. There's dots not being connected, and I don't understand. I need to go deeper. And so that really shed some light. That whole experience with leading the youth and reinventing the Mass really shed a lot of light on things. Also, in the rounds of this, we homeschool our kids. We started homeschooling our children, and our kids got connected to a Catholic homeschool group, and they just loved this. They were like, this is the best Bible study we've ever been to, and we loved the prayers. I was working with a guy who is a deacon, and we would talk. We traveled all over the world together, and he would ask me questions. And I remember every Monday we'd come in, and I'd say, how was your weekend? How was church? And he'd always answer, church is beautiful. And I remember thinking, man, I want beautiful. I want beautiful in my church. And which our church was great, but I wouldn't say it was beautiful. Things kind of started snowballing at our church, and some things were happening that we just disagreed with. And so we eventually wound up leaving our church in May of 2017, not thinking we were ever going to become Catholics at that point. That was not even close to being on the radar. And we'd go to visit some churches, and how was that? Well, that was great. That was good. Music was good and all this, but it's not there. My partner at work had given me Scott Hahn's book, Rome Sweet Home, which had been sitting on my nightstand for about a year. And I finally picked that up, and I'm reading this, and I'm just like, he is singing my song. I just couldn't believe it. He is just, this is exactly what I'm going through. And I've been reading the church fathers. That's what Scott Hahn did. And having these same questions. My wife was not happy that we weren't going to church. This is the first summer we'd ever not gone to church. It's almost like we had reverted. We were going to the beach. We were doing all kinds of things, but we just weren't going to church. And eventually things kind of came to a head. My wife was not happy. She's like, what are we going to do with the children? We can't raise our children like this. What are we doing? I don't know what we're doing. I don't know how long this is going to last. I can't tell you that. Still not thinking we're going to be Catholic. But later on that summer, getting into the fall, I said, I think we need to think, I think God's calling us to step out of the box. Something's going to be different. And I think that's going to be, I think we want to become a Catholic. And my wife said, well, we should probably actually go to church, and attend a Mass before we make that decision. And so the first Sunday of November, we did. We had the invitation of our friends. We went to a Catholic Mass, which of course we had both been to. I went to Catholic school, so I went every week to a Catholic Mass. Things had changed. I noticed some of the wording had changed. It was no longer, and with your, peace be with you, and also with you. It was, and with your spirit. And of course, we looked around, like, what has the Catholic Church changed? But we prayed before. We said, Lord, if this is where you want us, you're going to have to make it obvious. All right, don't beat around the bush. Don't make it direct. And from the moment the cross processed down the aisle, we were in tears. And so that was a big day. I asked if it was okay if it was too late to join RCIA, and our director of adult faith formation said, no, absolutely. Now, the funny thing is that first Sunday at RCIA was about Mary. And Mary in the charismatic church, especially the evangelical church, is a pretty much a third-rail topic. Catholics worship Mary. That's the Catholics worship Mary. And so I found it a little ironic that God put me into RCIA right on the day that on this very controversial topic. But for me, I think I'd already made up my mind. And so in Palm Sunday, 2018, I came into the Catholic Church. And then later that year, my wife was confirmed. And now we have 4 children. And we told her, they were teenagers at the time, but one was actually an adult. She'd graduated high school. And we told them, we're not going to make you do this. This is, you're going to have to make your own decision to do this. But eventually, they all chose to do that. And so they all joined RCIA the next year. Our son was attending youth. He was resistant to it at first, which led to a lot of tears and kind of some arguments. But then he went to a Steubenville conference. And he came back and said, I was going to become a Catholic because you were making me, but now I'm going to become a Catholic because I want to be. So the next year, on Palm Sunday, all 4 of our children came into the Catholic Church. And it was pretty fun because they, Vahlkamp, these 4 names, get read out, and you could see people in the congregation going, what is happening here? How is this happening? Life since then, we have not looked back. It's been amazing. The deeper we go, the more, it's been 3 years now. I'm going on 4 years since our first Mass, and we look at each other often and say, I am sure glad I'm Catholic. Have I told you lately how much I love being Catholic? I'm now in the diaconate program, and hopefully, God willing, I'll be ordained in 2027. My kids they're active as well for the most part. Teenagers, young adults, learning life. But we couldn't be happier, and we love being Catholic. Before we became Catholics, we served a lot in our church. We were actually small group leaders. I was on the board, I guess what my church would be, most churches would consider an elder. I guess led almost every ministry you could. I taught a lot of classes. My wife taught, led women's ministry and kids ministry. We did that for 22 years, with maybe some small breaks when we had kids. We were always involved in our church. We like to serve. We like to learn. We like to help others learn and see what Christ does for us. And that just intensified more, especially after I learned about theosis and this deeper truth, deification, and what Jesus really did. In the evangelical world, it's really all about that conversion experience. And people convert and they get baptized, and we just don't talk about baptism much anymore after that. So in the process of us, after we left the church, and we came into the Catholic Church, there was one day our priest, when I was at RCA, he got to know us, and he said, you've been doing this for a while, you've been serving, you should think about being a deacon. And I was kind of like, what is this deacon of which you speak, kind of a situation. So but it did, after as I learned that deacons were, it's the book of Acts, deacons were servers. That's what they did. They served the people. It occurred to me that that's what I'd always done. And so after I became a Catholic, and then later to be an acolyte, so serve those, and then Father Drew asked us, they needed an altar server coordinators, and so he asked us if we would be altar server coordinators, and we did that, which brought me full circle to being back in the altar server ministry again, where it started, I guess. So when I went to the interest meeting to become a deacon, of course you have to be a Catholic for like 5 years to be qualified, at least in this diocese. And so when I got to talking to the director, he was like, "Well, you might need to bake a little bit more." So we'll have another interest meeting in a couple of years. Come back. And so for 2 years, I thought about it. Do I want to be a deacon? Do I want to do this? And you have to do all this writing about yourself. That would be, I guess, 2020 last year. It was a confirmation mass. And I was helping with it, and as I was helping the priest right there at the beginning of the liturgy of the Eucharist, he kind of signaled me that I was the acolyte, and he said, "Okay, you can go back to," kind of gave me the look, and it was really interesting. I felt like I'd been clipped by the Holy Spirit as he started praying the liturgy of the Eucharist. It felt like this, cone of holiness came down. It's hard to explain. And so I went and sat down in my pew, and I was like, man, that was weird. What was that? But it just felt like, that was, God was there. The priest was, God was coming in, and the priest was leading the Mass in the person of Christ. And the truth, the full truth just hit me, that Mass. And I texted my wife afterwards. I said, I think I want to do this deacon thing. I think I want to be a deacon. This year I entered into the diaconate program to deepen the call to serve. And the more we are going through it, it's still early in the process, but the more we do it, the more the call to serve God's people comes around for me. When we decided to become Catholics that summer, we knew that there was going to be some challenges, I guess, with certain members of our families, I suppose. So when I told my mother, I knew that was going to be a challenge. She was not the happiest person in the world. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't terribly well received either. I remember in the rounds of this, my mom asked me this question. She said, "Well, what about papal infallibility?" I was like, I don't know. I don't even know what you mean by that, to be honest with you. Well, Catholics say the Pope can't be wrong. I was like, well, I don't think that's exactly what it is. So this began and it continues, this constant trying to understand, what people's beef is with. That's one I hadn't heard before, even myself. I had no idea what the deal was with papal infallibility. So I'm constantly trying to learn today, these sorts of questions. And I guess I can thank my mom for that, for driving me into wanting to understand and diving deeper into it, and understand what infallibility even means, what papal infallibility means, but also the doctrines of Mary. Because again, that was a third rail topic in RCIA when I started, and that's a controversial topic. And then, others. The Eucharist is another one. Well, how can you possibly say that Jesus is really present there? It's a piece of bread. I did have some members of our old church. They weren't really, people we knew, but they had made some posts on Facebook that their old former youth pastors were becoming Catholics. And, what do you think about someone following a faith that practices necromancy? I'm just like, necromancy? What is that? Praying to the saints. So some people consider intercession of the saints to be the practice of necromancy. And so that taught me a lot about how to hopefully engage people in love and mercy. But overall, our family has come to accept it. We don't have arguments about it. My oldest sister is actually Catholic. She became Catholic when she got married. So, maybe one day we'll be able to prevail upon them to become Catholic too. But,
Are you searching for fulfillment? Discover true happiness. Stay tuned to Shalom World.